Hello, everybody, and welcome to a talk with Putnam. If you don't know who Putnam is, she's one of the employees working for KitFox, contracted to work on Dwarf Fortress. Generally works in debugging and under-the-hood systems, not really working in the art or design departments. That's generally left to Zach and Tarn. In this series of videos, Coder's Workshop, we tend to talk about things that she's been working on, various updates that may be coming to the game, some ideas for possible system workarounds, and of course, the general state of the game and current bug fixes. I will also note that because I now have a newsletter and blog, this audio, the uncut audio for this entire conversation, is included for free on my newsletter's website. And in this video's description, I will link to that particular post. Thank you very much for watching this video, and hopefully you make it to the end. So how's it been the past few months? How was the beta launch from your perspective?
It was pretty hectic for a bit, getting a few crashes fixed really quick, and now all the crashes are one crash generally, involving something weird with the audio system trying to set the low, you could see it in the trace fmod set low pass gain, something about moving indoors, or the documentation sort of helps. I guess I would have to debug that area and see if it's trying to set it when certain setup that's required for that isn't on, but it's all unfamiliar to me. I didn't write the new audio system, so I'm rapidly trying to gain familiarity with it so I can help fix it.
Is this something that Tarn wrote, or was this an existing library?
It's all new, and I don't think I'm pretty sure neither of us realized should say something about how much I pay attention, that I'm pretty sure neither of us wrote it. It's not in the style.
Okay. So it's
I mean, I know I didn't, at
fair
least.
So this is the crash for adventure mode specifically that is mostly prevalent on Linux, but also exists on the other OSs as well.
Yeah, Linux, it's significantly worse. It's some race condition on Linux, and that's always horrific.
Yeah.
Things happening in the wrong order.
Fortunately, it's really easy to just jump over to a Proton instance and just run it that way. At least that's what I've been doing whenever I've needed to record stuff. Which takes 3 clicks.
That's not ideal.
Sure, but it could also be worse. I think if you're going to annoy any portion of the
worse.
community though with frequent crashes and having to swap into compatibility modes, it's the Linux community, because they're the ones that'll be understanding to a degree.
Yeah, they're used to it. You get more bug reports from them too, which is actually pretty good. Although one recent fix was really dumb on Linux. When you're opening the animal trainer screen, it sorts, to select a trainer for a specific animal. It sorts them by how good of a trainer they are. This is all very normal and as expected. This was crashing on Linux because there were null units in the unit list, and I thought, okay, that's weird, I'll just remove the nulls, and I did that, and it turns out they were still there, and then a few months later someone reported the same crash, and it turns out they were still there, and this kept happening. So I eventually started throwing crap at the wall to see what stuck, and it turns out fixing it involved just changing the the standard library sort to using standard library's stable sort instead, which should have literally no change in behavior, because but it does change behavior. So I guess GCC's implementation of the standard library intro sort, or whatever they have going on, is buggy and will introduce null pointers into during your operation. It's not even technically buggy. I don't think there's any guarantee that it shouldn't do that. Maybe it's actually undefined behavior for your comparison function to be trying to access pointers at any point. Which, that's fair, but come on. This is C++. This is how C++ is. Stable sort doesn't have the same implementation issue, which, okay. Worst case scenario, I just write my own sorting algorithm, which is always fun. It's like playing with toys.
I'm going to pretend that I understood what all of that meant. I understood some of it. It's been kind of slow sailing for a little bit when it comes to the user end, because it's been a while in between patches, and when patches do come out, it's it adds one small menu, and so from the player's perspective, it's very small, but from your perspective, talking to you, it's kind of a lot of code goes into building those individual menus. So I'm just kind of curious, could you talk a little bit about what goes into building a menu for something like adventure mode in the actual design side of things? Like what kind of work goes in from your end and Tarn's end to build a menu for adventure mode?
So the part of this is that I haven't been building new menus for adventure mode.
I guess I'm mostly just asking like what goes into a patch right now? What is the current like workflow from your end, I suppose?
Thankfully, I can actually look at the code and see what actually goes into adding new menus. So like for example, adding interactions to adventure mode. Yeah, 1651 lines of code. It's just a lot. There's a lot of like fiddling with like placing things on the screen, and like the code rather has a lot of placing things on the screen in specific places after going through all of your, and there's a lot of places that can go, like even with like the widget system, there's a lot of places everything can go wrong. Like even just yesterday I fixed a lot of stuff in widgets that are old, which is why I'm not, that's actually the main reason, is because I want to be like make it like completely painless to go back and fix things while Tarn is like building up adventure mode. Make sure both of those things can happen at the same time, which Certainly. Is really the thing that was missing from having only, like, there would be a big wait and then the game would be much buggier. And here the hope is that if there must be a big wait, the game can still become less buggy as it goes. That's the desire I have for that.
The long-term plan is less bugs in the future kind of deal.
And I mean, ideally, there won't be a big wait like ever again.
Yeah, we're still kind of, I think, at the tail end of the menu big wait, but you know, I always like to remind people now, it's like, you know, we are getting drip fed stuff, and it might be minimal and it might be very small and it might not feel like a lot, but we are at the tail end of basically, like, to me still the last major patch to the game, aside from like releasing on Steam and like the changes to the way Digging Too Deeply work, the last major patch for the game content wise, in my opinion, was like 2021 or like 2019, whenever guilds were added, whatever patch that was, which was like 4 years ago now, it feels like. So, you know, like that was the last time a major new system was introduced into Fortress mode.
Yeah, I've got all sorts of horrible major new systems I do in like semi-free time that I test and they don't work, and like but the code's there and can be made to work. And that's also the sort of thing I'm thinking about, where like, you know, people want emigration or whatever, and you know, better ways to implement better ways to get people to have like, what is it? They desire to own something needs, and like the ideas I have in my head are like, so how do we, if it's all abstract, how do you make coins matter? Well, that's easy. Allow dwarves to emigrate if they're unhappy, and if they don't have enough coins to take as they leave, then they'll get even madder and start throwing tantrums and things, that sort of thing. But that's like, that just sounds frustrating, right? At least at some point, if you're having to make coins and things.
Mm-hmm. Just about everything to do with the economy is seems frustrating to me. But we're talking about like far off future stuff that's like not making its way into the game right now. The other day you were talking to me about like the last two versions, right? So in the last beta update, which was there's beta 15 and then beta 16, which came out kind of rapidly all at once, and we got patch notes for beta 15. And it included some things that weren't in the patch notes, which was a bunch of like art for the like Cyclopses and stuff, which I'm assuming is just slowly drip feeding in as Tarn adds it. And then there's also like some interaction fixes that you talked about. So do you want to talk a little bit about some interaction stuff?
So the interaction fixes I added. Basically, before the game, I had to update the save. This is the first or second update I've ever added that actually has to change save games. Basically, when an interaction was added, like when someone got an interaction in history, it would not store when that interaction happened. And the way the game dealt with this is basically just, it applies the interaction syndrome as soon as the unit is spawned in, and then sets it to some hilariously huge age, the syndrome, so that if it's a temporary syndrome, it won't actually apply. I fixed this not knowing that the reason was because interaction age wasn't stored. And that's why you're like able to get drunk in adventure mode now if you like only drink wine, which is actually, I think that's kind of a problem too. And I think the solution would be to make different alcohols at different strengths, which is cool, but like it's
randomly going to poison people, I think. Which is also cool. I don't see a problem here.
Yeah, the problem with that, of course, is like dwarven wine is like actually a weak alcohol, like a. And then you got like whatever you make from dwarven sugar. I forgot what it's called. Or can you make things from dwarven sugar? That'd be rum, right? I don't know much about alcoholic drinks at all. Uh, but that's all a distraction. The main point is, so what would happen? You get an interaction that causes a curse, like you're turned into an animal, and it would properly like keep that up on you for 2 weeks, and then you'd fast travel and exit fast travel, and it would reapply the curse to you from the beginning, and that's no good. So now it actually like ages the syndrome in proportion to how long it was since the interaction was applied. So it's so no longer are you permanently cursed into an animal if you were cursed into an animal. That was a problem. That's the sort of thing you get in a beta, I guess. But yeah, would have been really bad if it released with that. Permanently being a vampire, well, that's just what you'd expect. Permanently being turned into like a giant sloth or something, that's not good.
Maybe
Yeah,
like a sheep would also be a problem. That would be very Noida, being a sheep
yeah,
permanently. Yeah, yeah. Just die randomly to something.
yeah. It's instant one shot,
Yeah, the interaction
no
stuff
immunity.
is fun too, and the other thing that you were talking to me briefly about is poisons. I'm not sure if that's made it in yet, but I'll tell you this: I've died to 2 Forgotten Beasts real bad recently, so I don't know if that's made it in. But there was something to
I
do with Forgotten Beasts and poisons.
I don't know either. Okay, so Forgotten Beasts and Poisons. That's a good one. Every interaction effect added since 42.01 was not accounted for in the poison selection for Forgotten Beasts and other such procedurally generated nasties.
So for a little bit of clarity, that's basically everything in the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, erratic behavior, feeling emotions, personality changes, all of which were added for alcohol. Plus all of the healing interactions that were added for dice rolling, minor blessings. None of those were taken into account. So the selection process for Forgotten Beast Poisons would go through all of the interaction effects that can possibly be added. And then if it was any of a specific set of blacklisted, it would re-roll. And if it wasn't one of those blacklisted, it would go on and try to add it. But only certain ones that it would try to add actually had like valid code for adding it. So in practice, what this meant was there were 33 interaction effects that it would try to add, and 16 of those would just fail and give you a blank interaction effect and do nothing out of 33, so that's nearly a 50% chance. And Forgotten Beast Poisons can have 1 to 5 effects, and I did the math on that, and it turns out only 20% of Forgotten Beast syndromes were as powerful as they should be. 18% of them would do literally nothing at all. And so, yeah, you can expect Forgotten Beasts to have more poison in the future.
The issue that I'm seeing right now, I think, with the caverns, is that the cavern creatures are fun, and I'm not referring to like the fishmen and the rodent men with the weapons that show up in organized armies. I mean like Mineras and like pond grabbers and cave
Floating
crawlers and
guts,
jabberers,
all the
like
good stuff.
those like the cave blobs, like the 700 like floating heads I had that were breeding and then that were just sitting somewhere, and then a forgotten beast with gas that made everything spontaneously vomit everywhere showed up right where they were, and then the entire cavern layer was full of puke, and because it was made of snow they couldn't kill it, or it couldn't kill them because it wasn't doing any actual damage. It just made things nauseous, so there was just vomiting heads everywhere. Like stuff
And
like that is just wonderful.
they were nauseous,
and I
so
love
they had
seeing
no
that.
skill.
But
Like they were nauseous, so they were failing all their attack
yeah,
rolls.
they were just missing. Like they couldn't hit it. It was very funny to watch. Eventually, something fell on it, or it did end up dying, and they all ended up dying too. But it was just funny to watch. Stuff like I love those interactions, and I find that when like all of the rodent men are in there, I don't know if it's like unit limits or something, but I find that if there is a stealthed army of like 200 rodent people with mounts, no animals show up. So the result is like you'll get forgotten beasts occasionally, but there will never be like trolls walking through the caverns. I only see that if I nerf them from the get-go. So what my strategy these days is, this is also just for a tip for anybody listening, is I go into the difficulty settings and I set the minimum number of cavern creatures per army to be 3, and then the maximum to be 5. So at most they're like in tiny little like raiding parties, but they're not big enough to be a huge threat to the safety of the fortress. So I can kind of actually go out into the caverns, and I still see trolls and crundles and stuff. But like, I feel like that should be the default. It kind of boggles my mind a little bit that the defaults are super high, and then a lot of players don't even know that the options are there to nerf them.
No, yeah, there's a lot of I mean, just generally it gets too stuffed really quickly and it's bad for performance and a lot of things like that. And like the easy solution is to just but like it's not even just reducing the difficulty isn't good enough because like there should be something of a soft cap on how many there can be. If not a hard one.
That, or we need some way to have diplomacy with them, which is honestly the thing that I would like to see the most. I would like to see them just show up and make demands occasionally.
Yeah.
Maybe don't demand artifacts, but maybe demand 40 meals or something. I don't know.
Demand 20 bars of steel. Explain why they have so much.
15 shields and 12 spears.
Yeah. It's a lot of. There's a lot of weird. Like the only reason I have it is because I keep getting distracted by like UI stuff. Just yesterday, there were complaints about how the justice screen was rendering, and they're right. They're good complaints. I fixed that. I forgot that you can set the UI to, or rather, I wasn't testing minimap. The new widget stuff works if you have the UI set to like only have a certain width on the screen, like 80% or whatever. But the mini-map widgets weren't because they were actually respecting that setting when they shouldn't. So I had to add a whole global, a flag that allows you to set certain widgets globally, and there's all sorts of fun stuff. And that's the sort of thing I usually work on, like UI stuff or going back and fixing very interesting crash bugs. Let's see. So there was a crash bug where if you have 0 alerts in a fortress, the game would crash if trying to check what civilian alert is. And having 0 alerts in a fortress,
it's pretty unlikely, but still.
I checked. I'm pretty sure that can only happen if you genuinely have like some sort of horrific deep save corruption. But it is possible. Crashing in that situation is kind of bad. It really doesn't need to. So that fixed. And I did get a save that has that problem. I get saves that have lots of fascinating problems. One particular crash was because some zombies had an invalid interaction index in their syndrome, so the game was crashing because it was looking for something weird, and I ended up fixing that, and they turned into mummies as soon as it was fixed, and that's like obviously a save corruption or like a save like updating wrongly or like a mod updating wrongly or something.
Right.
And it still needs to be fixed. When I see it crash, I try to fix it as soon as possible. The audio one is still there because I have looked into it quite a lot, tested it and things, but it's a lot to keep track of, and I'm just not sure what step in the process is causing the crash, because it's one of those sorts of things where it only crashes if certain preconditions are met, and it's really hard to determine what the actual preconditions in like the system are, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like heap corruptions and things, which is, by the way, temperature multi-threading. When I was first doing that was the kind of crashes I would see. So that's why it's not in the game at all. Because I have not been able to get past whatever's going on there. I'd have to, if I want to do temperature multi-threading, which is doable, I've done something nearly identical in the past, I would have to just rewrite it from scratch, which isn't as bad as it sounds, but just takes a long time, and I'm not sure how good the performance gains would be. Because obviously temperature has an ambient FPS, like, drain that's, like, constant and always there, and, like, not small. It's not, like, big, but it's not small either. Like, you can measure it with your eyes pretty easily. But the really big temperature issues are obviously when something's on fire and it's constantly like changing the repathability indices, and if you have a really big map, this can take literally forever. There's also a lot of crashes. Actually, really big maps, that's a thought too. Pathfinding on really big maps is broken, genuinely. Like, it doesn't...
I see it especially with birds on big maps.
Yeah, I mean, like 16
by
by 16. There's some people I know from like completely unrelated things. One of them plays Dwarf Fortress and occasionally complains to me that, hey, these guys aren't doing anything. And I opened their save and they're playing on a 16 by 16 save. And I was like, yeah, why do you do this to yourself?
I mean, it gives you a warning when you
It does.
settle.
6 by 6 is 6 by 6 is like almost is
I usually
just
play
about too
5
much
by
room for
5,
me.
and that gives you a warning.
5 by 5 is fine. The thing is, like, 16 by 16, especially if, like, when you've got all the caverns linked and things, that's a lot.
Usually what I try and do is I try and find maps that are very thin. Like I crank up erosion often. So I'm usually settling on maps that are only like 60 layers deep total. So I try and have less layers and then settle on bigger spaces. Just because you can make some pretty grand looking things, and I tend to build on largely 1 or 2 layers anyway, just because it makes it easier for people to follow on a stream. But I guess I'm kind of a unique case there.
Yeah, well, I mean, few layers and really wide is, like, FPS optimal anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
the,
yeah, no, I guess I'm just at this point, I haven't, I've been holding off asking to have Tarn on the stream again to talk with him purely because like I want the next one to be after adventure mode is in the main branch. And I guess my question to kind of wrap up this conversation is just how much more do you think there is to do still from your guys' end, like workload wise, before adventure mode releases? Or is it still a lot to still get done, or is it something that's like, getting things are going to come together quicker than people might expect? Where are we
I
at?
think you can sort of see it. I'm thinking of actually excel. Like, the main thing I kind of want to try doing myself is some of the, like, customization stuff, because I just don't like re-rolling my personality and over until I get good needs.
Yep.
Like, all the coming soon stuff is pretty, like, in your face.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
all pretty clear.
and, like, what steps need to be done. I think there's, like, obviously hero and chosen stuff needs work done. There's already more implemented than you might think.
Yeah, I'm
I
just kind of
think
assuming that there's a lot of stuff that's just disabled, but quietly getting implemented based on what people have been saying. But
I think if you're playing as a hero, there's a lot less limitation on what you are, like, allowed to ask about and learn, and what you learn from things. Something weird like that. I've looked in the conversation system and seen things like that. Uh, I think I don't know what the plan for Chosen is in particular, but it's probably something more like that, and probably, getting quests from on high. I'm speculating exactly as much as everyone else is here, though. I only have, like, barely any more info. I don't remember if all of that's even getting into the first adventure mode release.
yeah,
Uh,
the posts from Tarn have been kind of vague, so it's hard to sort of decipher, and it's hard to sort of decipher, but it's also like from my perspective, like I have to be careful when trying to decipher it because I don't want to accidentally say something and then that turns out to be completely wrong. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's even worse for me. People
Yeah,
are just gonna
absolutely.
believe me, and,
Yeah,
like, I don't know because I don't really need to,
yeah,
and I so I don't ask. It's fine. This is fine. This is how things should work.
certainly.
Uh,
Yeah.
the
Well, I'll ask. How about this then? Is there anything that you would like to get in optimizations wise, or is there any specific menus you want to build for the release of Adventure Mode?
the first thing I could think of is sometimes it just spawns too many units, so getting some sort of really good notion of, like, which units it should actually spawn in, and being more selective about it might be good,
Right.
because I have a save lying around. I loaded it in and they said it was freezing, and I moved and I looked at my CPU and saw it get pegged repeatedly, meaning that, like, each individual unit was taking, like, which meant multi-threading was happening. So line of sight code was taking apparently 20 seconds per tick.
Yeah.
And or, well, not per tick, per 10 ticks, so 2 seconds per tick. And that's really bad, and I checked it. It's because there were over 6,000 units, most of which are probably in one room.
Yeah. All
That
just
shouldn't
stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, that probably should be avoided. That seems like a bad thing to me.
Yeah. I
And
would not disagree with that.
a smart way to fix that would be good, but it's like, go through everyone who you could spawn, sort them by some notion of like importance, spawn in all of the important ones, and then keep spawning until you reach some vague sense of like unit cost or whatever. I'm not entirely like it's a big question of what exactly you do there. And like what if I guess you could always just check for like make sure the people relevant to any quests or whatever you have spawn in first. There's a lot of consideration, but that is a thing that I really want to look into, because the biggest like performance problem in adventure mode is easily just there's too many guys in one place. Big problem. Maybe not even like limiting the amount of units that spawn, but limiting the spread, like spreading them out a little so they're not all seeing each other and thinking, is that my aunt or whatever.
No, I mean any kind of limiting you can do, or anything that can like just increase the performance, because I think it's jarring for some people, and I think that's a turnoff. Like for new player, like people who are expecting it, I don't think mind so much, and I think people who are expecting like slowdown in adventure mode are definitely the sort of people who are going to be like, well, it's better than it was, right? Which is definitely how I feel. Like when I end up in those areas where it's running slow, it's like, well, it's running slow, but it's playable, right? If you like, I go to version 47 in it's the same kind of area, and it's like it's not playable. So I think like there is a massive performance boost, and I think a large percentage of people who run into those performance issues aren't going to appreciate the performance increases. But yeah, I think it should ideally be in a better place.
Yeah, and like for all those who are wondering why is checking for ants slow, it's like, it isn't slow. Like maybe it takes a hecto-nanosecond or something, a tenth of a microsecond, and then you're doing it 30 million times. And then a tenth of a microsecond times 30 million is 3 seconds.
Yep.
So there you go. That's the trick to these things. If it's your big O notation, it's n squared, and there's to do line of sight stuff, and there's a lot of ways you could skip around. But if everyone's in one room, then it's just gonna be the square of all the guys in the room. It's like, simulating it is weirdly similar to simulating like a solar system with 6,000 planets or whatever. Your computer's not going to like it.
The player character is the sun, and the ants are the bugs.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I've actually thought about like, I don't know, including some really weird, like explicitly buggy, insanely aggressive optimization modes or whatever, just in case you just want the game to play fast. Kind of like, I forgot the name, the DF hack script that like genuinely makes the game no longer deterministic, but does make it playable.
I wouldn't know it off the top of my head. I'm not super well versed in DF hack.
I'm actually gonna check its name, because it's a really cool script that I like a lot. It just changes how fast units do things in order to make the game run at the time stream. Makes the game run at what appears to be the FPS you sit it at, even if it's actually running slower. It speeds up the calendar rate and
that seems really hacky.
It is hacky, but it's cool. And optionally units just make the game look like it's running at 100 FPS or whatever, for all intents and purposes. And like liquids will run slower relative to the units, but it does work. It's really cool. That sort of thing as like but the problem is that if you build that in, then people expect it to like work more than they do with DF hack, and like there's a lot that can go wrong there. Like I was thinking of a lot of weird crap you can do for optimizations, like make line of sight checks genuinely just smaller, like instead of 26 units out in every direction, like shrink it if the game's running below your target FPS or whatever. That would make the game faster, like a lot faster. But it would also make it...
if they're all in one room, though?
It wouldn't help if they're all in one room, no.
Because I find that's what generally happens.
It would make the game genuinely, like... What's the term? It would make the game non-deterministic, but like a lot faster. Like all sorts of things like that. But we want... determinism's good, and if everyone's got these settings on, then you've got... It just becomes a lot harder to fix bugs, and that's the sort of
stuff
you think
it's a short-term fix that causes long-term issues, right?
Yeah, so like, I don't know, maybe put up a warning every time the game opens with it on saying, hey, if you have a bug here, you should report it, but like, don't be surprised if we can't figure it out. That sort of thing. I mean, we already have that for multi-threading, which it isn't even that, it's not even close to that bad, so. And it does add a bit of non-determinism, even right now. If you, have multi-threading on. If you have multi-threading off, the same dwarf will always report a body at the same time if they die in like the middle of a tavern or whatever. But if you have multi-threading on, that won't happen just because body reporting is technically in the threaded area, and the first one that happens to be processed will just happen to be the one that reports the body, and that can make a difference, but it's not a major one. You know, that sort of thing.
Well, I think this is probably a pretty good place to cap this off. You know, we've talked about some recent stuff, some long off in the distance stuff, and some things that you're kind of looking forward to working on. I've got 40 minutes of audio here, so I think we should wind down and call it. Alrighty. Well, thanks for coming on once again, and I look forward to chatting with you next time.